Hello and welcome to the Alberta Mentoring Partnership webinar, Evaluation 101 with BGCBigs. So AMP is a network of community mentoring agencies, government and youth working together to raise the profile of mentoring in Alberta. We exist to help schools and mentoring agencies meet the needs of the youth they serve. AMP supports the development of healthy, engaged citizens and can support your organization in strengthening your program offerings. Our mission is working together to strengthen Alberta's capacity to support and enhance mentoring. Our vision is for young people to thrive through mentoring relationships. One of the ways that AMP achieves our mission and vision is by sharing evaluation resources with our partners and community. Before I introduce our guest, I would like to acknowledge the land that we are on in Edmonton here. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, truth, and reconciliation, we acknowledge we are on and support mentoring for youth in the traditional territories across Alberta. This includes the soil, rivers, plants, and all animals on Treaty 6, 7, and 8, and the land of the Métis and Inuit people, whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. We honor the connection and contributions of the Indigenous peoples of these regions by remaining committed to decolonizing our mindsets and practices. We continue to provide safe spaces and positive mentoring relationships to all children and youth who call these sacred lands home. Oh, wrong slide. Today I'm here with Kendra Connolly, the Impact and Evaluation Manager at BGCBigs, Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Edmonton and area, also known as BGCBigs. Sorry, and the BGC is Boys and Girls Club. Kendra holds a master's in health education. I'm just going to stop sharing. Kendra holds a master's in health education and a bachelor's degree in public health from the University of Waterloo. Today, Kendra will share a brief introduction to evaluation resources, and provide some examples from evaluating mentoring programs here in Alberta. Thank you, Kendra, for joining us today.
Thanks, Pam. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, can folks see that? You can see it, Pam?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for the introduction. We, like Pam said, are here to chat about evaluation and just a high-level overview. So I'm just gonna, there we go. So a few things we're going to cover today, an introduction to evaluation, what it is, why we do it, preparing for a successful evaluation, some knowledge mobilization strategies, and then some tools and resources. So just to start with an introduction, like Pam said, my name's Kendra Connolly. I'm our Impact and Evaluation Manager here at BGCBigs. And I thought a great way to start the introduction would be sharing our theory of change. So the theory of change is a tool that you can use for a program or an organization that is a way to visualize what you're doing and what the impact of it is. So for us here at BGCBigs, we support vulnerable children and youth, and our vision is that all young people discover and achieve their full potential. And we do this by providing supportive spaces, positive youth mentoring relationships through mentoring clubs and youth engagement programs where young people can experience new opportunities and develop confidence and skills for life. And then at the bottom, you'll see the section on what is the impact. And these are our outcomes. So we have 3 outcome buckets is what we kind of refer to them as. So typically you'll see outcomes divided into short, mid, and long-term outcomes. And at our organization, we decided to shift that into this mindset of reaction, shift, and behavior. And so when kids come into our program, we anticipate that they're going to immediately react to the support that they're receiving. So in terms of like a relationship with self and others, youth might feel a sense of belonging through the programs they participate in. And then as they participate in our programs, they're going to have a shift in their thinking, and that's eventually going to lead to a change in their behavior. And so this is how we visualize and speak to our outcomes at the agency. So what is evaluation and why do it? When I was writing this slide, I was like, how do I sum up what evaluation is? I don't know. I feel like it's a million things. And so I went to the Canadian Evaluation Society website and pulled their definition, which is evaluation is the systemic assessment of the design, implementation, or results of an initiative for the purpose of learning or decision making. To the right is a list of words that you might hear frequently. And these are all kind of evaluation words or things that would count as evaluation. So we're talking inquiries, impact analysis, needs assessments, needs analysis, process evaluation, metrics, review, monitoring, performance indicators, cost benefit analysis. All of these are different words that people kind of throw around that all are evaluation in a sense. So evaluation can do so many things, but we're going to talk today about why we might evaluate mentoring programs. And I'm going to share an example from our work at BGCBigs that grounds us in that a little bit. So there's lots of reasons we might evaluate a mentoring program, and I have 5 reasons here why we do it at BGCBigs. The first is to understand our outcomes. So what are kids getting out of our programs? And then the second is to improve design. So what are we learning through what we're doing and evaluating that can change how we're supporting children and youth? We also want to demonstrate our impact. And so this can be to community, it can be to staff, to volunteers, families, and then of course to funders as well. So how do we share about the good work that we're doing? And evaluation is one tool that we can do that. The fourth is to inform decisions, processes, and policies. And so this ties a little bit into improving design, but also looking at, what we're doing as a whole. What are our policies? Do they make sense with what we're seeing through evaluation? Are there ways we can change our processes? If we want to test something new or we have an idea, what information might we use from an evaluation to kind of inform that and make that decision? And then the fifth is influencing system change. And this is kind of looking at the broader system. So in this case, we're looking at mentoring as a whole and how kids get access to that and experience that. And so what learnings do we have as an organization or from our programs that we can share and make changes on systematically? So preparing for a successful evaluation, the first question you want to ask yourself is the mentoring program ready to be evaluated? And the answer isn't always yes. For example, we have a new program at our agency, kind of along the lines of mentoring that we want to evaluate, but we also know it's in such a developmental phase that we need to get a few things sorted first. And so three key pieces. Are there clear program goals and objectives? So do you know what you're evaluating? Is kind of the first step in this. If you don't know, maybe we're not ready quite yet for an evaluation. The second is there available and reliable data? So we want to look at what data already exists that we can use and leverage, and what data can we collect that's realistic and reasonable for us to do in a time frame that we have, and that's going to shift and change based on what you're evaluating. And then the third is the buy-in and engagement. So we ask ourselves this question a lot at the agency: for what and for whom? Why are we doing this evaluation? What purpose does it serve? And who's going to benefit from these results or these findings? And then can we generate buy-in from those groups and make sure that everybody is along our path? There's a lot of different approaches you can use for evaluation. So it's kind of like research in that sense when you think about there's different research approaches you can use. Same thing with evaluation, only I feel like there's so many more. And so what approach you're going to use really depends on what you want to learn, how you're going to use the results, and also where the program is at in stage of development. So when I talk about this program that we're not quite ready to evaluate yet, we're still doing different pieces around collecting data, thinking about what our outcomes might be. We're doing all these tiny little pieces, but just not quite ready for a full evaluation yet. There's no single approach that fits every situation, but I thought I would share 3 that we use a lot. The first is utilization-focused evaluation. So this essentially is how are we going to use the findings and really intentionally planning for the use of what you're finding and learning in evaluation. The second is developmental evaluation. And so this one supports innovation and adaptation, and it helps guide some of these decisions in real time. So you might be doing the evaluation as you're looking at data, you uncover something, and we're going to implement that finding right away and then learn from it. And then the third is participatory evaluation. And this is where partners are helping with defining what success looks like and also interpreting the findings as well. So this is really a co-creation model. We, I think, find ourselves using these three pieces a lot kind of in one evaluation. So we kind of dip into different approaches, more so the first two, and then some components of participatory evaluation. We're gonna, like I mentioned before, I'm gonna share a template for evaluating a mentoring program. So this is a template that I frequently use, and I change and adjust it as I need. It contains two key sections. The first is a program overview, and this is a great section to have in any evaluation plan or report thereafter, because it helps ground yourself in what the program is, what you're evaluating. So when you go to speak on this or share it with people, you can refer back there. And then the second is the evaluation outline. And this is kind of the meat and bones of all of the work. So we're looking at, why you're doing the evaluation, the approach you're using. This is where the questions and the methods are. And then I'll talk through the evaluation matrix, which is a tool I like to use, and then a timeline as well. So a lot of content here on this slide. This is the program description for a mentoring program we started called Game Changers. And so for all of my examples, I've pulled pieces from this evaluation work that we did. But here it says what the purpose of the program is and how our mentees and mentors engage with the program. So for us, we were testing a site-based mentoring model. And we were going to have we had mentees come to programming in the evenings at two different sites across the city at the same day and time each week. And we selected youth based on those who were close to the sites, but who were also waiting to be matched with a one-on-one mentor. And then for volunteers, anyone interested was able to apply through the website. We did some recruitment, and then they were screened and went through our normal volunteer processes. So we just have some narrative there for that. The next part that we include in this section is a logic model. And so I think most folks familiar with evaluation are familiar with the concept of a logic model. And this is just telling us what our program is doing. So we have some narrative on the context and the purpose of the program. So again, for us, we noticed there was this supply-demand gap for boys wanting to be matched with a male mentor. And we wanted to find a way to serve more of those boys and see if there were alternative models we could be using. Then in a logic model, you're going to have all of your inputs. So what are all of the things in a mentoring program that's going to make it work? So we're talking staff, administrative supports. We're going to need knowledge, expertise, materials, funding, facilities, all of these pieces. Then you want to look at what are the activities that are happening. So at our program, we had children and youth arrive at the program. Volunteers were there, and they participated in some guided programming by a staff facilitator. And then we also have some narrative there around kind of how old the boys were in each program. And then you can see the outputs, which are any of the number data is kind of how I like to refer to it. So number of kids who attended, number of volunteers, number of hours spent at a program, number of applicants we had for volunteers, all of those number pieces that you can kind of report on and look at in different ways. And then the last column is our outcomes. And this is all of our outcomes for our programs are reflective of our agency outcomes that I would have shared in our theory of change. And so this is what we're hoping kids are going to get out of the program. Some logic models also include some sections for assumptions and external factors. For us, our assumptions, one that I'll share is that the program was free, and so it would reduce financial barriers. So that was an assumption we had. We weren't really looking to measure that or evaluate that in any way. We just had that in the back of our mind. And then some external factors were access to transportation is something we might want to consider with it being at a specific site. How are youth going to get there? And then, of course, political climate and the community perception of the program are always factors that can shift and change what we're doing. The next part in kind of the program overview section is our list of partners. And again, this is just a good piece to have in here to reference as you're thinking back to who's involved in a program. So we list our internal and our external partners. So internal is kind of the beneficiaries or those like directly involved, so clients, volunteers, and staff. And then external are other partners who they're necessary and they're helpful and they help make the program work, but they're not directly in it. So these are kind of community partners and funders. Then we move into the section around the evaluation outline. And so this is, again, the meat and bones. We first identify what the purpose and approach of the evaluation is. And so for us, the purpose was to explore youth and volunteer enrollment, as well as staff recruitment. And we also wanted to understand the experiences of youth, families, and volunteers and staff as they participated in the program. We were really trying to get under, is this a viable option? How might this program look and work? We've never done something like this before. So this was really a learning piece for us. And because of that, we took a developmental approach in the evaluation. So we were wanting to take those findings that we were coming across throughout the evaluation process and implement them back into the program design. And this provides that rapid real-time feedback to kind of nurture learning in the moment. The next piece here is questions. So when you, again, are you ready to do an evaluation? What do you want to know? There's going to be questions. So for us, we had 4 key questions. I have one highlighted here. Our key question was, what are we learning about the experience of youth, families, volunteers, and staff as they engage in the program? And then we have it broken down into kind of these sub-questions that are a little bit more measurable. These 3 questions are process-focused, outcome-focused, and impact-focused. We don't have many descriptive ones in this example, but we had kind of some other questions that were more like, who are the youth who are participating in the program? Who are the volunteers? But for these questions, we're asking, to what extent is the program being implemented as intended? So this is kind of a process question. We want to understand like what is happening in the program and how is it working? And then to what extent is the program offered meeting agency outcomes? This is our outcome focused question around like, are we doing what we've set out to do and is it working? And then what are youth and families' perceptions of how the program is providing male mentorship to boys compared to other programs we offer at the agency? And this was our impact kind of related question. We wanted to understand if the work we were doing was having an impact where we wanted it to. To measure questions, you're going to need to use methods. There's 2 kind of umbrella methods you can use, qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative is the words, the feelings, the narrative. Quantitative is the numbers. Our kind of motto, I guess, in evaluation that we talk about a lot here at the agency is no numbers without narrative and no narrative without numbers. And so we like to use a mix of methods to kind of tell a full story. I've highlighted one method that we used just here on the slide, and that was a document review. And so we're really just looking at all the information we already have and analyzing it to kind of answer some of our questions here. So we had some information in our database, which is called SDP. We had some information on the clients that we were serving through that database. We were tracking attendance, and then we also had our program plans that our staff created. And so we looked at those program plans as well to kind of help measure and answer some of our questions. This is an evaluation matrix, and this is probably my favorite tool to use in evaluation because I just find it so helpful to keep folks on track with like, what are your questions and how are you answering them? And so we always make these when we do these larger evaluations. This, again, is from question 4, which I shared earlier, but you'll see it has all of these sub-questions listed. And for each sub-question, we have our indicators. So that's how we're going to answer the question. So if we look at the first one, which is to what extent is the program being implemented as intended, our indicators are how the actual implementation of the program is aligning with what's in those program plans or those program outlines. We also wanted to look at some narrative responses. So when we're talking to folks, what are we hearing? And then we did some observations as well. So what are we seeing that's happening? The source column is kind of your tools that you have. So for us, it was the logic model, those program planning documents, and our staff for this particular question, their insights. And we found the data to those indicators and answered the question by doing that document review. So that's one of the methods I shared. We also did a focus group with our staff and volunteers, and then we went and observed the program as well to see it in real life, what was going on. We took all that data, we did some descriptive statistics. So that's, like base low level statistics, percentages, anyone can do it kind of thing. All of our number data goes there. And then the thematic analysis is our narrative. So what themes are we noticing from what folks are saying, from what words we're hearing? So we have that broken out for every kind of question in the evaluation and every sub-question. The last piece in an evaluation outline that we like to include is a timeline. I like to break this into 3 phases: the preparation phase, which is all of the pre-work that needs to be done, and then the implementation. So this is the actual, like, you're in the weeds doing the evaluation, analyzing the data, and then the 3rd phase being reporting. So we're sharing back what we're learning. We break it in. You can do this in different ways. I generally like to break it into months. Some folks like to do days or weeks, but we have just some key timelines for when we're going to do certain things. So you'll see in the preparation phase, this is happening at the beginning of the timeline. Implementation is happening kind of in the bulk. This is the bulk of the work. And then that reporting period, of course, is at the end. We also like to have a little status column to kind of go back and reference, like, what have we done? Is there anything outstanding? These are working documents that we use. And so at the end of the timeline, you'll see knowledge mobilization is a piece here. And this is what we're going to talk about next. Now, the process of knowledge mobilization is how we're turning everything that we've learned, all of this knowledge that we've gathered, into action. So it involves sharing, translating, and applying findings. At this point in an evaluation, we've done all the work. We've collected the data, we've analyzed it, and now we're trying to figure out, like, what are we going to do with all of this information? There's 3 key pieces that we like to think about in terms of knowledge mobilization. So the first is, who is your audience? Who needs to know? And throughout an evaluation, you're going to have lots of different audiences. So for us, an example is, maybe our staff is an audience, and now we're going to go down that path of knowledge mobilization with them. Our leadership team might be an audience. Our funders might be an audience. And so you're going to have multiple audiences, but you want to narrow down for each one what their key message is. So what does that audience need to know? Most people don't need the entire evaluation report. It's not going to be helpful to most people, a lot to digest. So we want to pick out what are those key pieces of information those folks need to know. And then how are we going to share it with them? What's going to resonate with them most? What's going to be the most helpful tool for them? And so I have, I think, 5 examples here that we can go through quick. So the first example is the audience is our project leadership. So these are the folks who are making the work happen. They are leading the work. They're leading the generation of the idea. And for them, we wanted to test the evaluation questions and the plan with them. And so this is a component of knowledge mobilization that's happening before we've even done the evaluation. So we actually did this in our prep phase, and we used a PowerPoint that walked through what the evaluation questions we thought we might want to ask and what our method for doing that is. And then we worked collaboratively with the team in an implementation meeting to decide what we were actually going to do and what would make the most sense. Second example is all staff meeting. And so here our audience was all of our agency staff. And again, this happened in the preparation phase. we wanted to introduce this project we were doing with staff, and we wanted to share how we were evaluating it. So we made this infographic, and then we worked through it at our all staff meeting. So I kind of have community presentation listed here, but we stood in front and we shared, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's how we're going to do it, and here's when we're going to do it by. Third example is our strategic thinking day. And so we had a group of our agency leadership and then the members of our board as well, all in a space on a Saturday, talking through all things strategic thinking. And one piece of that was some of our work around serving more boys. And so we took, this was kind of a midpoint in the evaluation for us. And we had kind of took what we were doing, why we were doing it, how the project might shift and change. And we shared that with folks through a workshop that happened during that strategic thinking day. And so for this, we used kind of like a brief here that highlighted what exactly we were doing. And so for this example, the Game Changers program was kind of one component that we called site-based mentoring, but was highlighted here. The fourth example is a team reflection. And so this is where we came together again with that project leadership, and we had a report, and then we also had an infographic. So usually when I meet with folks, I like to start with an infographic because I find it's more digestible. And then we go back and we reference components of the report. But we, sat around the table and had a conversation of here's what we did, here's what we evaluated, what reflections do we have on this, what lessons have we learned, and what are our next steps with this work. So we did that with folks. And then from there, that team went and disseminated that information further to their staff. And then the last example I'll share is a podcast. So this audience is the general public, staff, volunteers, really anyone who's going to tune in. But our key message here was we wanted to share the impact the program was having, and we also wanted to use it as a way to recruit more male volunteers. So our agency has a podcast that's hosted by a youth, Harper. She's amazing, lovely, hilarious, and she interviews different folks in the agency and different programs. And so she highlighted the Game Changers programming twice, once with the supervisor who kind of led the program, and then once with a volunteer who supported the program. And then we also shared this within our internal agency newsletter so that staff could kind of see there as well. So just kind of to summarize, there's tons of different ways that you can do knowledge mobilization, kind of three key buckets. One, written products. So these are like the physical tools. So you saw reports, infographics, briefs. Another tool that I didn't have an example of is like a toolkit. I know AMP has a great toolkit on their website that I've utilized recently. So just kind of a way to house information. And then the middle bucket here is the like interactive or relational pieces. So how are you like sharing or facilitating the use of these findings? Webinars, workshops, presentations, knowledge sharing circles, co-interpretation or co-creation, implementation meetings. And then the third bucket is these digital and visual tools. So this can be social media posts, videos, podcasts or interviews that are done. And then dashboards are another helpful tool. We use dashboards a lot with our staff to kind of summarize our agency data. And they just kind of see it on their computer every day, which is super helpful. The last piece I'll share with you quickly is just some tools and resources that I've found helpful learning about evaluation. The first is the Canadian Evaluation Society. This is a kind of like the professional organization for evaluators. There's lots of different professional development opportunities. They share about some networking and community building opportunities, and then they have lots of resources and publications on their website. ECN, or Evaluation Capacity Network, is the next kind of local resource I'll share for the Edmonton area. They have a great evaluation repository with, again, tons of resources. And they've also done a lot of collaborative research and evaluation. So folks will come in and support agencies in doing evaluations. And then they have some great educational opportunities too, some eval courses, all of those great things. The next website that I love is Better Evaluation, and they have just tons of frameworks, tools, and methods. You can learn all about different approaches, how you might implement them. You can kind of do a search for like which one might best fit what you're trying to do. And then the fourth one I'll throw in is this podcast. I'm an avid podcast listener, and this one's called Indigenous Insights, an evaluation podcast, and it's conversations with Indigenous evaluators, leaders, researchers, and scholars who are working in thinking about and supporting Indigenous evaluation. And so it was a really, I've listened to all the episodes that they've put out now, and it's a really great thought exercise and ways to look at how we're incorporating Indigenous values and methods into the evaluation work that we're doing. And that is all I have. So I think, Pam, we've saved some time for thoughts and questions, but maybe I'll pass it back to you.
Yes, it's time to open it up to questions to our audience. While they think about their question and put it in the chat or unmute themselves, I think they can, or if you raise your hand, we can unmute you. I'll ask you a question, Kendra. So you highlighted the Game Changers evaluation, and I know that there's a lot of different programs happening at BGCBigs. Would you have an evaluation for every program at BGCBigs, or is it depending on the grant? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So kind of as I mentioned at the start, there's so many different evaluation activities that you can do. And so for us, we do annual program reports for every program in the agency. And so we're always looking at our data for our kids and volunteers. We're always looking at what the program did that year. And we're always looking at our outcomes for each program. It's more of a monitoring sense for us now because it's so routine and structured. So we're not necessarily coming up with new questions every year, but we are making sure that we're looking at that data, and managers and staff are quite involved in the process of writing reports. And in that process, we're able to talk about what we're learning or what we have learned. And then we always have a section at the end for kind of like learnings and considerations moving forwards. And then we'll convene the managers first, and then supervisors and staff to talk about what have we learned, what are we going to do now, and move forward with that. So we've implemented it on like a monitoring basis for everything we do. And then we kind of save these like big evaluations for when we're testing new ideas or new programs, or if we have like a specific question. So sometimes when we're pulling together our program reports each year, we realize in the example of Game Changers, wow, we have a lot of boys waiting to be served. What can we do? And then we might kind of do an offshoot evaluation.
So Game Changers is a newer program. You might have mentioned this, but what did you use? Utilization focus? Did you use developmental? Which one did you use for the Game Changers?
Yeah, we primarily took a developmental focused approach because we really wanted to implement learnings as we were doing the evaluation. But then it kind of goes into this utilization focus naturally in terms of like, well, now we have this information. How are we planning for the future? And then we used a little bit of participatory when we engaged with some volunteers as well.
Great to hear kind of how they all work together, and there's a bit of that crossover and figuring out what works best for you. We have a question in the chat from Sarah. What would you advise for a smaller agency or organization to evaluate? For example, a grant or new program. I'm assuming it can also work on a smaller scale.
Absolutely. So I really like the template, and I'm happy to share the template with folks if anyone's interested with that, because I think it's a great way you can make it as big or as small as you want. So we've used this template where we've had just like one question that we want to answer. And so I think that's always a great starting point is using that template to kind of guide what you're trying to do and how you're going to do it. The other piece again is knowing what your question is or what you're trying to evaluate. If you want to kind of do this big evaluation, or not big evaluation, but if you want to like evaluate a program in full. Other things I would kind of recommend for smaller agencies or organizations, especially those who evaluation is new or not necessarily a part of the day-to-day work, is understanding what you're already collecting and what maybe you're not collecting but might want to. And so most folks usually have information on like the demographics of those that they serve. Some people will have outcome data if they do surveys, but there might be other pieces that you might want, or you might realize that there's a better or different way to collect them. And so that's kind of a lot of the pre-work that helps set you up for those bigger evaluations.
Yeah, we definitely have varying sizes of organizations that are running mentoring in the province. And so accessing the resources that you shared today, accessing the evaluation capacity network repository that you mentioned. And then we also have at AMP an evaluation page, which I'll share in the chat, which can take you to our pre-eval webinar series, which the evaluation capacity network did with AMP before, and can help you think about evaluation in multiple YouTube or through our Engage website, where you could get some support from the Evaluation Capacity Network on that website as well. I'm going to share that in the chat for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, a great first step is always kind of those like program reports each year. Like that is such a good foundation to help you think about, to reflect on your data each year and what questions you might have.
What would you say in regards to, many of our partners have grants and they have grant reporting deliverables. And so they'd have that data, but then they want to do a bit more evaluation because they have questions. They might not be required in the grant, but they want to grow the program or look at their impact and get more data. So yeah, where do you think they kind of start with that evaluation piece? Maybe like one question, a smaller evaluation or.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time over the last few years really nailing down what our agency outcomes were. And that was really helpful for us because although we're large, but that almost then makes it a little bit harder because we have all of these reports, all of these grants. And so we've been really working really hard to align our outcomes for our grants with our agency outcomes, which then naturally allows us to like look at impact on a larger scale. So I guess I would recommend like looking at what are you already reporting on to funders, and is that the information that you think is valuable for you and your organization? And if it is, that's great, and let's keep on that track. And if it's not, or if it's challenging, are there ways you can kind of advocate with your funders or with your fund development people to shift those outcomes, even if it's in maybe a few years from now when the next grant cycle comes out. But I think evaluation has a really great role in, like I said, shaping systemic change. And part of that is that advocacy work of, these are our outcomes and this is what we want to see in kids and youth. And so this is what we want to report on for this money that you're giving us.
That's a great answer. And really aligning your organization outcomes to those grant outcomes decreases the work that has to be done in the long run because you're not doing more work, and it helps everything kind of cross well together.
Yeah.
From Chelsea, do you think there is ever too much researching, surveying for evaluations, or is there no such thing as too much data collected?
Great question. I like to talk a lot about data stewardship. It's kind of the language I use. And it's just about being intentional with your data. And so what are you collecting and why are you collecting it and what are you going to use it for? And if you don't have a reason of why you're collecting it and you don't know what you're going to use it for, you probably don't need to collect it. And so we often will review kind of what we're collecting. Like we review our surveys every year. We review how often we're surveying, and we make sure everything's aligned with our granting requirements and our evaluation requirements, because we know that survey fatigue is real. We don't want to be sending out 1 million surveys to kids and families. And so we want to be really intentional. So I do think that there can be too much there can be too much use of the methods, I guess. I guess for research and evaluation, in and of itself, it's really, really valuable. And when you're doing it strategically, I don't know that there's too much because you're doing it strategically for a purpose. But when you're doing it to doing it, that's where I get a little bit worried sometimes. So just being intentional about the purpose of this. So that it kind of goes in again of like, is this ready to be evaluated? If it's not, if you don't have all of those kind of steps in place, you might just be doing it to do it. And that might not be a good use of resources.
Chelsea, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
So sorry, I just pressed the wrong button.
All good. Great question, Chelsea. And a great answer, Kendra. That navigating that too much data collected is definitely something to be strategic about. And it's great hearing how you're navigating that at BGCBigs. Okay. There's no more questions at this time. So I am actually going to let you know some of the events that are coming up for AMP. AMP is running a mentoring in schools workshop in High Prairie tomorrow. I drive today to head to High Prairie. And we'll be doing more of those mentoring in schools workshops in the future. And then Sarah Chan will be at CAS FNMI Gathering on May 1st and 2nd. So if you're going to that conference, see her there. I'm also going to, oh, Sarah, do you want to say hello? I'm going to share my screen and you can see our newsletter and you can sign up to follow the AMP newsletter. There's also Instagram and Twitter or X and Facebook if you're looking to see what AMP is up to. Otherwise, thank you, Kendra, so much for coming and sharing your knowledge about evaluation, specifically to mentoring in Alberta. Super relevant for all of our AMP partners. So thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, thank you all for attending and asking questions and learning about evaluation with us. We look forward to sending out Kendra's resource to with the recording of this webinar as well. So you'll see that in your email box. Okay, well, thank you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Okay, we've stopped recording and